Good morning. Awesome. Welcome to the third annual OpenDaylight Summit in the beautiful, beautiful city of Seattle. You know, I'm so happy to be in front of you, and as I was preparing for this presentation, I was thinking to myself how fortunate we all are to be having a chance to participate in such an interesting, exciting journey that we're all on to transform an industry that impacts so many people around the world. It's also amazing to think about how far we've come. If you think back just 4 short years ago, none of this existed. So quickly, a community has come together and is so effective in what it is that we do. We have seen tremendous growth in our project. What I have up here on the screen for you, on the left side, what I have charted are the total number of contributors and commits to open networking and SDN projects. It is impressive to see that over 1,700 individuals have committed code to an open networking or SDN project. And certainly I don't have every single one of them here on this slide. And they have cumulatively committed over 97,000 commits. And those commits, of course, can be a line of code, or they can be thousands of lines of code. But we're seeing real commitments from so many of these individuals. If you look at just OpenDaylight, or if we dive into OpenDaylight, what you see is it continues to be the case that roughly half of the people and half of the work in the entire industry is being done in this project, in the OpenDaylight project. And what we've seen is that with every release, more and more people jump on the bandwagon. More and more people see the value of adding to this great common platform that we are building. We are now over 800 individuals, many of you sitting in this audience, who have contributed to OpenDaylight. And while the rest of this talk will certainly be focusing on OpenDaylight itself, I do want to recognize a broader trend. OpenDaylight isn't alone, or at least it isn't alone anymore. While so many of you in this room recognized that we needed a Linux of networking, and that having a controller platform, an abstraction platform that was open at the core of our network was critical to achieving our dreams, it turns out there are many other elements that are useful to have as open platforms too. And I'm so excited that what we're seeing is that the experience that we've had in OpenDaylight is starting to propagate. We've had OPNFV that has now gone through a couple years and achieving some great success. We've got the new OpenO projects around orchestration. Certainly there's open source Mano, that's not on this slide. We've seen AT&T talk about Ecomp, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. And certainly many projects down at the infrastructure and data layers. Before I go much further, I want to express my gratitude first and foremost to all of you in the room who have contributed in whatever way you've contributed to our effort and to our industry. Whether you're a developer or you're someone in a supporting role, all of your work really does matter. I also want to recognize that people come into our projects and people end up having changes in their lives and their careers. And so I wanted to recognize briefly 3 specific individuals who I am personally grateful for the contribution that they have made. The first individual, I'd like to ask him to stand up, is Dan Pitt. Stay standing, please. For those of you who don't know Dan Pitt was the executive director of the Open Networking Foundation for 5 years. He just recently moved on from that. And he has been a tireless campaigner all around the world, educating people about the promise of SDN. And so we owe him a tremendous amount. Thank you, Dan. The second person, if she's in the room, I don't know where she is if she can stand up, is Margaret Kiyosi. Thank you. You may not know Margaret because she's very quiet as a person. Margaret was with AT&T for many years and was initially incredibly dubious of many of the things that I promised that we might be able to achieve in OpenDaylight. And she really gave us a hard time, but we were so grateful for it, and we're so much better a project because of the investment that she made and the evangelism she did within AT&T. Thank you, Margaret. The last person is not in this room, is Tony Tkachik. He may be less familiar to some of you than the other two. Tony is a developer. He was one of the original developers of the MD-SAL, worked for Pantheon and Cisco, and so much of the code that all of you leverage was written by Tony. And so since Tony has just moved on to a new position, I wanted to express our gratitude to him. But really, I hope that these three individuals stand for the work that everyone is doing, because the truth is I cannot recognize every person who has contributed to our effort. In fact, when I was thinking about what is this event all about, what is different about this event versus VMworld, Cisco Live, Oracle OpenWorld, Dreamforce, it is something that I'm now calling developer-user intimacy. No, I don't mean the kissing that I saw you guys doing outside. Sorry. But what is different around open source is the fact that unlike in a commercial software environment, not only can users sit next to the developers of the code that they use, but that the interaction is certainly not one way. Yes, we see problems. Yes, we get engaged developers. Yes, they build a code base. But the real difference is the way that end users end up interacting with the developers. The way that people like Margaret Kiyosi's team picked up Hydrogen, banged on it, found a ton of issues, but then were able to choose to partner with the developers to help us make it better very, very quickly. It is because of that that we're able to get production-grade solutions so much faster than you ever would in a purely proprietary world. The result is actually very clear. What we're seeing is a sea change in the way that users of networking software are wanting to consume the solutions that they go by. No longer are they simply happy to accept the lock-in that comes with many proprietary solutions. Instead, they're actively asking for and demanding open solutions. There was a survey recently done by SDX Central, and they asked this question: of the open solutions out there, which ones are you considering? I'm proud to say that OpenDaylight is by far the #1 most considered solution in this space. And it's not just what they consider. If you go look at deployments, it looks like almost the identical same graph. People are noticing the hard work that we've all been doing. If we look at all around the industry, from a whole set of quotes that I put a couple years ago around people not believing that we could achieve our vision, now here's what we're hearing. OpenDaylight in that same report seems to have the most momentum. If we look at end users like Chris Rice of AT&T, from whom you will hear soon, he talks about why. It is about the fact that we can have immediate impact, that our software can have immediate impact on the environment that they have today. If we look at industry giants, industry leaders like Cisco, we have Dave Ward talking about OpenDaylight having become the de facto open source controller. If we look at the press like Forbes, Forbes is talking a little bit about not just what we do, but also how we do it. What the industry is noticing is the reason we're able to achieve what we're achieving is because of the transparency of the community and of the decision-making that we have. People are also noticing this isn't a science project, and we're going to talk a lot more about this. And then finally, what I think excites me the most is that influential thought leaders like Ethan Banks not only see what we are, but see the impact that we will have, that we will continue to have, because once you have a platform, it unlocks a whole set of innovation on top. I titled my keynote, OpenDaylight, It Just Got Real. And I think you will find that this is not just the theme of my keynote, but in fact the theme of the entire conference. Because 3.5 years in, what is different around OpenDaylight is not just that users are getting engaged, but that users are actively deploying OpenDaylight to solve real major problems in their network. I can't think of a better example than what we're seeing with AT&T Ecomp. For those of you who don't know Ecomp, it stands for Enhanced Control, Orchestration, Management, and Policy. And it is really a new platform that AT&T has been deploying to make their infrastructure delivery much more software-centric. It heavily leverages OpenDaylight, and this is not a science project. It's been in production now for more than 2 years. It's also not a one-off. Their interest is not just simply to upgrade their own ability to deliver infrastructure, but the industry's ability to do that. And they have expressed an intention to open source Ecomp that is already being tested by a fellow operator, Orange. And so you will hear a lot more about Ecomp from Chris Rice in the next keynote, and I urge all of you to go hear the details of what exactly is Ecomp from Brian Freeman's presentation on Wednesday morning. Now, lest you think that it's just AT&T, it really isn't just AT&T. Comcast is another example of someone who invested very early in OpenDaylight. With the help of Cable Labs, they began to contribute to OpenDaylight from the earliest releases. They have a very broad vision of how SDN can change the way that they deliver and manage their network. One of the key things is how do they improve on some of the services that they already offer? If you're like me, you might have Comcast at home, and I chose to pay a little bit of money for the Comcast Digital Voice. It's a fantastic service in that, unlike most other soft phones that I have access to, I have never once heard jitter. I've never once had a drop call. The call quality is perfect. However, to deliver that, they have to basically take a piece of my bandwidth and dedicate it to voice. What if, when I hung up my phone call, that bandwidth could be available to me for other things? Well, they haven't been able to do that with current technology. Thanks to OpenDaylight, this is something that Comcast hopes to roll out soon. They also see OpenDaylight as a way to be able to communicate better with me as a customer, to be able to send me messages while I'm sitting there surfing the web, and so much more. So it's great to see Comcast not only leveraging OpenDaylight, but actually contributing to the code that we have. And I urge you to go listen to Samir Patel's presentation, which will be this afternoon at 2:15 to hear the details. So I've just talked about 2 service providers. Is that all that OpenDaylight is about? Actually, no. Certainly we're seeing the service providers heavily investing and engaging and leveraging the platform. But I'm starting to see more and more enterprises getting interested, getting engaged, and with big, real problems that they can solve with OpenDaylight. One of the most interesting ones that I heard recently was that of Microsoft IT. As you can imagine, as a software company, Microsoft IT has to manage one of the largest networks in the world, but also one that is highly distributed. They need to support mobile workers all around the world. And like many tech companies, they find that some of the most senior executives spend a significant portion of their time on the road. They spend tens of millions of dollars a year to be able to try to serve their workers. And like many big companies, unfortunately, their workers still have the challenges we all know very well of not being able to get on the conference call and not being able to hear the other person. And so Brent Hermanson, who's going to be talking later in this conference on Wednesday, is going to talk about a bold vision that Microsoft has. They're asking the question, do we really need the corporate network the way that we've always had it? Could we, in fact, turn everything upside down and go internet first for all of our apps, for all for all of our workers. And so he's going to talk about how they are leveraging ONF's Atrium Enterprise project specifically to achieve that within their network. You can hear more about this ONF Atrium Enterprise project in a session that Gert van der Straten and Bitika Kargaria will be giving on Wednesday at 3:05. I could give you 5, 10 more examples of this, but you're going to have to take my word for it, that there are so many major companies in the world leveraging, looking to leverage, implementing in production OpenDaylight today. And as excited as I am about that, I'm actually even more excited about this next slide. What you see on the left side is a list of projects in the OpenDaylight project, sub-projects. And on the right side, I have logos of the companies that have led or are participating in those projects. What's really interesting in open source is I'm often hit up by end users who wish that the code did something that it's not doing right now. And they come and ask me, like Margaret did, hey, we would love a better way to edit and create Yang models. Is that on the roadmap? Actually, no, it's not on the roadmap. But I can try and help find people to do it. But you know what? Sometimes people are impatient. And in open source, you can wait, or you can just start doing it. And that's exactly what AT&T did. They found a developer, they began to build it out, and then they contributed back to the community. Another similar conversation in March in Paris with Orange turned into this Transport PCE project. And they took it one step beyond. Not only did they say, we're going to put developers to start building the technology that we need, but we're going to reach out to some of our peer organizations and do it as a broader collaboration. Transport is an area that I keep getting asked for. And again, what am I seeing? I'm seeing end users like China Mobile, KT, and Etri out of Korea coming together and actually building the code that they want. It's not that the end users don't want to go through a vendor. In most of these cases, most of these operators do want to buy end solutions from a vendor. But they have the ability to start building the technology that they want, that then a vendor can come in and build on top of. In fact, while here I've got 5 projects in front of you, more than half of all new projects for Boron came from end user organizations. That's pretty incredible. 3 years ago, we had 0 end users truly engaged. Now we've got half of all new projects coming from end users. I'm so excited to see the growing diversity that we have in our projects. Growing diversity across every possible axis. Growing diversity in terms of types of companies, size of company, vendor, end user. But probably most interesting to me is how global a project we're becoming. If you've been involved in open source for the last 20, 30 years, you may have noticed that open source has seemed to be dominated by North America and European players, actors, developers. While there's always been the ability for people to contribute from all around the world, the projects haven't been as global as they're becoming right now. When we look at OpenDaylight, what we're seeing is a project that is not led by one company, that is not led by one person, but also that is not led by any one region of the world. Our community is large and growing. Today, over 3,500 people are members of an OpenDaylight user group. They're meeting in 27 cities all around the world. In fact, all of you sitting here come from 28 different countries. And I don't mean where you were born, London for me. I mean where you traveled from just in the last week to get here. This community is creative. In China, the meetup platform that we use all around the world doesn't work very well. And so they have jumped on the QQ platform, driven by the Tencent company, and already over 1,700 people have joined that group. We as a project believe this diversity is very important and a key strength of ours. We as a foundation are investing in that diversity. We've got an India forum that we launched just over a year ago. We bring a whole set, mainly of the technical community, together. We got over 300 people, lots of great local content. We don't just simply do events. We recognize that we need to help people get on the ground floor. One thing we heard from a lot of vendors and users is there are a lot of employees interested in OpenDaylight, interested in SDN, but they didn't know the first thing about SDN. And so we partnered with the Linux Foundation to create a simple online course. Think of it as an SDN 101 utilizing OpenDaylight. In less than 2 months, over 700 people have taken that course. And this isn't someone going, oh yeah, why not, clicking for 5 minutes and clicking out. They each had to pay $150 to be able to take this course, so this is very much real. We're going to continue to invest in growing this community. We're going to syndicate content for OpenDaylight user groups all around the world in 2017. And we're going to launch an OpenDaylight Days program to bring some of the magic here, as we're hearing so many people don't have the travel budget to come. You know, as incredible as the global nature of our project is, there is one specific region, and in fact, one specific country, that has most surprised me. I've suddenly found myself going back and forth to China. We all know that there are a lot of people in China, but I don't think that's actually the most interesting thing. One interesting thing is how quickly new technology is adopted. So if you look at something like feature phones or fixed broadband, you know, those earlier innovations took 10 years. Even a technology like QQ, which is like a Snapchat type thing, that still itself took 10 years to get to 100 million users, that magical ceiling, or not ceiling, that magical threshold. But now if we look at new technologies like WeChat, what we're finding is you can launch something and have 100 million people on that platform in under 2 years. There is a dynamism in China that you really don't experience unless you have a chance to go. One of the most mind-blowing experiences for me was a visit that I did to Tencent, who I've mentioned a few times. You know, many of us, I think, in the West, think of China as a country that makes cheap stuff and copies what the rest of us do. But that is fundamentally a misunderstanding of what is going on in China. Yes, the Chinese are eager to learn. And yes, they're willing to build on top of the ideas, to leverage the ideas, really what we do in open source, to leverage the ideas of others. But they don't stop there. If you look at something like Tencent, the WeChat platform is often understood in the West as, oh, this is kind of a Chinese version of Snapchat, but it is so much more. It is a global micropass, in a sense, that allows many different applications to be written on top of their platform, that allows mobile payments. And we're talking about 700 million people using it already today. And they got that growth in just a few years. Why I tell you about Tencent is, as you can imagine, they have one of the biggest, most challenging networking problems in the world. Their growth eclipses most US-based web companies. And they're heavily leveraging OpenDaylight specifically to take their network to the next level, to manage that scale. I'm so glad that we have the gentleman who manages their entire infrastructure here at this show, who will tell us a little bit about how they're leveraging OpenDaylight. Now, maybe Tencent is just an anomaly. I keep being told that, you know, yes, China's big, they'll consume your stuff, but are they really going to give back? Are they really going to fund your project? Are they really going to contribute to your project? Well, something interesting started to happen. Alibaba, the second in the famous BAT, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent. Alibaba has one of the largest networks in the world also. And you know what? They've been very involved in standards, but they shared with us, it's taking too long for the standards to come out. We want to invest in OpenDaylight. We want to leverage OpenDaylight, and we want to support your project. And they came in and said, we're going to contribute, we're going to support the project. And right after Alibaba, I had a chance to go see Baidu. And I'm thrilled to say that Baidu, just like Alibaba, just like Tencent, has said, we want to support your project. We want to get engaged. I had a chance to go to their headquarters, beautiful headquarters right outside of Beijing. Phil and I were walking around, we're amazed at the innovation of what they were doing. They shared with us in detail their plan, how they're managing tens of thousands of switches in their environment. They shared their growth, they shared their architecture. Unfortunately, I can't share any of that with you. But I can tell you I was blown away, both by what they're doing, but also how they're doing it. And they're heavily looking to leverage OpenDaylight. Since I can't tell you the details, I want to tell you a short little anecdote, which really, I think, speaks for the experience that I had in visiting Baidu. In the middle of their campus is this climbing wall. It's about 8 stories tall. It has a map which is about the height of this stage at the bottom. And there are chalk marks all the way up the top of the wall. But do you know what you don't see on this wall? Anyone? Ropes. Very good. There's not a single rope there. What does that mean? Any employee can badge in, and you can climb as high as you want. And I can tell you, if you fall from the top, you're dead. Right? There is no recovering from that fall. And as I thought about this, I'm a decent climber, but I'll tell you, I went a couple stories and stopped there. I think it really speaks to something really interesting about what's going on at Baidu and in China, which is they are willing to take a risk. They're willing to do something gutsy. At the same time, they expect every one of their employees to know how high to climb. Because certainly, I don't think every employee is climbing all the way to the top. They wouldn't have very many employees left. And this is what we see in China. And this is why China is the fastest growing community in OpenDaylight. Now, okay, BAT, you've heard of BAT. They're very innovative. They're new web scale companies. What about the other big operators? Well, guess what? China Mobile is our latest silver member. One more new member that I'm proud to announce on the stage today. And China Mobile is very happy to have me tell you a little bit about what they're doing, because they're actively contributing already today to the OpenDaylight project. If we look at China Mobile has an aggressive plan. They're in a major dogfight for the winner of public cloud. In the US, we seem to have 2 or 3 companies. In China, there are a whole set of players who would like to be the Amazon of China, or the Amazon Web Services of China. What China Mobile has done is leveraged OpenDaylight as their data center cloud controller. What's interesting when I'm talking to people like China Mobile is it's not just their appetite for reimagining everything. It's not just the resources that they have to be able to create something, but it's also the scale at which they can test. When I sat down with them to talk about this, I said, well, you know, this is being built by a research division. How real is this? My keynotes about OpenDaylight, it just got real. And they said, well, you know, we're first planning a small proof of concept. My heart kind of fell. Well, tell me about it. We're first going to roll it out to a couple smaller cities in China. Oh, well. How many people do you think will be impacted? Not that many. 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 million people. That's the scale of China. And so why I'm so excited to have China is, on one hand, we have a set of people who are willing to really rethink how things are done, who are absolutely willing to forego not invented here and leverage open source code, but also who have the ability of getting immediate feedback in terms of the production realities of running this code. And so I think one of the big themes I want all of you to take out of this keynote is that end users are here, and end users are here to stay. And we're so thrilled to have them. At the same time, the OpenDaylight ecosystem, just like any healthy ecosystem, needs many species to survive. What I'm speaking about here is that everybody who is sitting in this room, for the most part, okay, most people sitting in this room have a salary that is paid by somebody who is looking for an ROI for the time that you're spending right now and that you're spending on the project. And it is important that vendors are able to make money, as well as end users are able to solve their problems for our project to succeed. You don't have to open too many newspapers to realize that the days of super fast growth and high profits for all of the networking leaders are no longer here. Many people's growth has slowed down, revenues are often quite flat. And the reality is that if you are an industry leader right now, you're faced with an incredibly difficult choice. Something that was well written if you're familiar with the book, The Innovator's Dilemma. On one hand, you can take the easy route. You can keep doing what you've always done. Build on proprietary, sell proprietary. It's worked for the last 20 years. Maybe it'll keep working for 20 years. But you now have another option. You can build on open source. And that's scary. There are a whole bunch of new challenges that face you if you do that. And I will tell you, within every major vendor that I talk to, there is an internal battle. As some people are saying, no, you can't make money on open source. It's too complicated. It's too hard. The code base isn't mature. We'll wait 2 more years. And the people who say, you know what? We don't want to get BlackBerried or Nokia'd. I'm thrilled to say that I see people taking the chance, taking the risk, making the gutsy call. A great example is Ericsson. When Ericsson needed to build SDN solutions for their customers, the easy route would have been to just build it all proprietary, just like the five other competitors that do so that they face every day. But instead, not only did they pick up OpenDaylight, but they picked up OpenDaylight across multiple divisions. And they worked and collaborated together internally, which I can tell you sometimes is harder than working with companies outside of your own organization. And the good news is that we've started to see customer wins coming from these products. You've seen announced Swisscom, LG, Telstra, and of course, Telefonica. It's not just Ericsson. There are many others. Another good example might be Fujitsu. They've doubled down on OpenDaylight. What do I mean by that? In fact, 2 separate divisions, one going after enterprise, one going after telco, both independently and separately built completely separate products based on the exact same OpenDaylight platform. Even more interestingly, when they realized they needed to rev their legacy management tool that they give to their customers to manage their gear, rather than write yet another proprietary management tool, they picked up the code that they had worked for one of those BUs and built their management tool on OpenDaylight. What this means is that by the end of next year, if you're a Fujitsu customer, you will be managing your Fujitsu hardware using an OpenDaylight-based management platform. Again, it's not just Fujitsu. We're seeing that as people are looking at the next set of solutions, like IoT solutions, once again, the OpenDaylight codebase offers the chance to accelerate your ability to deliver a solution. If you've ever gone into a hospital, you've probably noticed they have a gazillion devices for taking your blood pressure, for monitoring you, for seeing your baby if you're pregnant. Yet all of those require someone to sit down and write down all of the statistics in a little form that goes at your feet. What if we could connect all of those to the network? Well, but the problem is security, of course, right? How do you do that in a scalable way? How do you do it in a secure way? Well, Avaya built this little device. What's really interesting about this device is you can put it in front of all of these devices. But how do you manage it remotely? How do you control the flow of these devices? Well, with their partner InnoCybe, they built a controller to be able to manage this. But SDN doesn't scale, right? Well, they actually showed that you can manage 168,000 of these from one OpenDaylight cluster. OpenDaylight is allowing industry leaders, startups, and users to innovate in a way that they could never before. But of course, we do face this innovator's dilemma. But there is one player who doesn't face it. or there's one set of players, and those are startups. I've been excited to see that we're getting more and more startups getting based around OpenDaylight. One example is InnoCybe. This company focuses on building a SaaS distribution. We in OpenDaylight don't build solutions. We build technology. We build a technology platform for people to build solutions from. What InnoCybe does is they make it easy for anyone who's building a solution to be able to take the bits that they want from OpenDaylight and rev those bits as new versions come out. They're growing like crazy. They're expecting over 100% growth this year. And they're active in the community, and they've just increased their support of the foundation up to the gold member level. But it's not just InnoCybe. Cero is another startup focused around delivering real solutions to enterprises and service providers. And what they have found is rather than building everything from scratch, works a lot better to take OpenDaylight and build over OpenDaylight. And before I ever talked to them, they already had their first production deployment. They have 3 that they can talk about, and I believe that there are a couple others that they can't yet. And then the newest one is a company called Frinks. Frinks was built by a group of people who were involved in OpenDaylight technically from the beginning and saw recently a great opportunity to go build a business around OpenDaylight. And so it'll be really interesting to see what Frinks ends up doing in this space. Now, as you've been hearing about these vendors, one question you're probably asking yourself is, okay, that's great. Lots of people want to be associated with our success, but will they be true to it? End users, in fact, are asking the same question. They're increasingly asking in their RFPs, is your solution built on OpenDaylight? Does it work with OpenDaylight? But really, they're asking 4 other questions. It's not just, is your product based on OpenDaylight, but is it really based on OpenDaylight? Someone told me recently they had an experience with OpenDaylight and it really didn't work great. And as we dug in further, it turns out that the person had leveraged Hydrogen and had never updated it. All right, it's sort of based on OpenDaylight. Really, another question is, will it work with my hardware? And will my ODL app that I wrote, that I bought, that I'm going to buy, will it work with this? One of the reasons to buy an OpenDaylight-based solution is that you're not locked in. Well, but that requires everybody to build their apps in a relatively similar way and leverage the same components. So I'm happy to announce that we're taking the first step to helping end users with that. We're announcing the Powered by OpenDaylight program, and it is being launched today, September 27th. What it is a badge that you earn by building your product with certain specific components, by making sure that you're on the latest or just the previous release. And it's the first step to being able to say, hey, if I buy a product from Ericsson and build an app on it, and tomorrow I buy a product from Brocade, and they both are powered by OpenDaylight, I should be able to move without too much effort that app across both. There's a great appetite for this. I'm even hearing that some of the larger service providers are looking to have their own type of certification like that, because people are very interested in having a common platform and then buying best-of-breed solutions from people. And so if you're at a company that is still having this big debate, do I build on open or do I build proprietary? The question that I want you to ask is, there is a wave coming. The risk of being BlackBerried or Nokia'd is very real. Today, people may have to buy a proprietary solution if the open source-based solution isn't quite there yet. But we're catching up so darn fast. Do you really want to be going to market with a solution that is closed and proprietary and locks you in? And do you think you're going to keep winning those deals a year, 2 years, 3 years out? Are you riding the wave, or are you in front of it? And the second thought that I want to leave each of you with is the turnaround to the question I keep getting. We have some members of the press in the front here, and they keep asking me, where will OpenDaylight be in a year? Where will it be in 2 years? When are you going to get better clustering? When will you get greater this, greater that? You know, the right answer to the question of where will this journey take us next is it depends on each one of you. Because at the end of the day, the type of community that we have built is one where there isn't one leader. It's one where there are 867 leaders in the project. The question of where we will be, what I will be presenting this time next year, is more dependent on you than it is on me and my staff. And so I hope you enjoy this conference. We've got a great set of keynotes coming up for you today. We've got a great set coming up tomorrow and a great set of technical sessions. I'm really looking forward to seeing where this journey takes us next.